Good afternoon, NAGAP friends. We will get started here in just a few minutes. All right, as we're joining NAGAP friends, we will get started in just a couple of minutes. We're giving everybody a chance to log in. All right, well, I see a stationary attendee counter, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, my NAGAP friends. We are joined today by John Covell and Jamie Alexic.
It's a
Alexic.
tongue
I
twister.
did it. I did it. And from Carnegie, and they're here to talk to us about grad enrollment in the search of AI. And with that said, I am going to kick this over to Jamie.
Hi, friends. I'm seeing some familiar names and faces. For those of you that we do know and don't know, I would love for you to just drop in where you're from, where you're calling in from, just so we kind of get to know you a little bit as well. But thrilled to be here. For those that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name's Jamie Alexic. I'm the SVP of GTM Strategy here at Carnegie and have been here for about a decade. And in that time, have been to 6 NAGAP conferences. So very excited to see many of you in a couple weeks coming up in Baltimore. But we're thrilled to be here. I've brought my colleague here, John Koval, to talk about AI search. He has been kind of at the forefront of this ever-changing landscape, and we're just excited to kind of chat through it with you today. And we have an exercise for you within this as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and kick it over to John to introduce himself and get us started. Oh, and one other thing I'll say
Thanks,
before,
Jamie. Thanks.
sorry, one other thing, John, I'll say is we welcome questions throughout. I'll be monitoring the chat, so feel free to drop those in and we'll get those answered for you. But go ahead, John.
Thanks, Jamie. Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. Very, very excited to chat with you all about graduate enrollment in the age of AI search. AI search has really exploded in the past couple of years, especially in the last year. It's really taken off and becoming more and more mainstream in a lot of different ways and a lot of different impacts for various institutions, various programs, and then just advertising in general. And I'm going to talk about a lot of this stuff as well as how you can think about and approach AI search in your marketing and in how you communicate your messaging. So there's a lot we're going to go through here. I'm going to kick us off with a quick introduction of what we're going to talk about. So the evolving search landscape, what's changed and what hasn't, how AI sees a brand, how to measure success from awareness to readiness, and then some AI news and resources. So who am I? As Jamie said, my name is John Koval, the VP of Integrated Paid Media. I've been at Carnegie for 5.5 years, but I've been in the search world, the search ecosystem for over 10, and that includes both paid and as well as organic and SEO, AEO. So a lot of search things are kind of the things I think about all the time. And it's this new way of searching and the way of looking for information and marketing to those people looking for information has changed. It's been very exciting for me. This is the biggest change in marketing, in my opinion, in the past 20 years. So a very pivotal and exciting time for me, especially. I Managed a Quiznos sub, totally unrelated, but it's like my claim to fame. I think I mention in every single presentation I do. I just, that brand, it means a lot. It's my first job, and I managed. I always like to talk about it. For anyone who likes Quiznos, please raise your hand. There's not many of us left, and there's not many stores left. I could talk about Quiznos for days, but I'm not gonna. I also used to live in Japan. Another fun fact: I did that after high school for about a year. I don't really speak it anymore, but I can still count to 10, so I consider that a win. So let's talk about the evolving search landscape. And to really contextualize what's going on here, we need to kind of go back in time a little bit, not too far back, but let's think about 80s and 90s before we had the internet as we know it today. Anyone looking for information used to have to go to the source. They used to have to go to a library, for example, go to an index card, find out where we need to look for specific information on how do I make chocolate or how do I bake that specific cake. And they go to the library, and then they go to the aisle, and there's that stool there and that picture in the middle, which I can like smell this room, right? And it's uh actually I really still like libraries to be honest, but this sort of discovery was common. And then you go to maybe the encyclopedia and you look up the information you needed, right? That was a good way or one of the ways that you had to go to discover the information. And the world was different in a lot of different ways too, right? Like asking for directions. That's a not something that happens anymore. We have Google Maps, and we have all these different tools to do that. Calling someone to set up an appointment. Maybe that happens still, but a lot of times you can do it instantly on your phone. Or if I need a job and I need to get an apartment, all that happened through classifieds. Like the world was very, very different. And then in 1998, something happened. And does anyone know what happened in 1998? You can throw it in the chat if you have any guesses. I'm not, okay, I'm gonna give Windows, good guess, Mary. The answer was that Saving Private Ryan, Armageddon, and Mighty Joe Young all came out in the exact same year. From movie perspective, fantastic. Then from a music perspective, Goo Goo Dolls released Iris. The Boy Is Mine. And then the soundtrack for Armageddon came out. And then from a TV perspective, Seinfeld had its last episode, but it's okay. Whose Line Is It Anyway came in and picked up the slack. That was not probably the answer you're expecting. The real answer is Google. Google was released in 1998. And this is a pretty like adorable screenshot of the old Google. It's come a long way since then, but this is what it looked like originally. And you might know it like this, right, as it is today. But what it did is it transformed information discovery. All of a sudden, as opposed to going to the information, going to a library, picking up a newspaper, whatever you need to do, calling someone from the yellow book, all of that was moved to the internet and moved to a place, a single unit or a single place where I can search for and discover information. And it's been this way for a long time, but this is like a revolution that happened only less than 30 years ago. But now we're at a precipice where it's revolutionizing again, and that's coming from AI. And I use the word revolutionize because I do think it has a true revolutionizing impact. It's not just a change, it's not just a transformation, it's a revolution. So think about the 20 years I just kind of covered. Information discovery has been that search bar in Google, a query, a results page, and a click, and some more clicks. In this example, I have best MBA programs in New England, and I'm screenshotting me like navigating Google, right? And I click onto this website, and then I say, it's not all the information needed, so I got to go somewhere else. That information discovery, the process of doing it, and for the burden of discovery, for lack of a better term, is really on me, or is on the prospective student, or is on anyone looking for information. They still need to navigate the sites. They still got to read through it. They got to vet it, understand what they need, what they don't need. It's much better than going to the library, but it is still a discovery that required some extra time and effort. 2022, something else happened, and this one I don't have a joke, but I could think of something. But what happened this time is ChatGPT was released. And when ChatGPT released, that fundamentally changed information discovery again, right? And think about why. Well, all of a sudden, from a higher ed perspective, information about institutions, your institution, competitor institution, whoever, is sourced from across the web, and then it's summarized and synthesized into real-time answers. So that burden of discovery, that extra step of navigating all the sites is gone. And I can be very, very personal and direct with the type of information I'm looking for. And give details about what I want, why I want it, what does work for me, what doesn't work for me, whether that's pursuing a specific degree or just deciding to go to an institution as a whole. So now we went from searching, as we've talked about and think about, right? Students went from that searching modality to conversations. And conversations are much more powerful than a search. And I kind of went through it pretty quick, but at the top of this ChatGPT example, I provide way more detail about what I'm looking for, kind of like what I talked about just now. But I'm looking for an MBA program in New England, proven ROI, flexible class schedules. I live outside of Providence, and I would like to either complete it in person if it's an hour away, or I could do it online. What are the five I should consider? And it's giving me why it stands out, format, what's my commute, what's the ROI on it, summary of what it is. And then I can ask a follow-up, give me information on the top two, or give me information on one or the other. What's the pros and cons of this program versus another program? It's way more in personal and impactful to me as a prospective student than just searching and navigating some Google sites. And that AI-powered search experience is everywhere. I use ChatGPT because it's the easiest one to speak to. It's the most popular one, but it's all over the place, right? Copilot, Perplexity, AI Mode, Grok, Gemini, Claude. They're all kind of doing the same thing. But at the end of the day, it's that experience that I want to focus on. And this is leading to a shift, paradigm shift, is a good way we like to say it, where brands, not just in the higher education, but across advertising, across the industry, marketing, across both like retail, from credit cards to, it doesn't matter what it is, brands have to show up in AI search engine responses. As you can see, this conversation is way more impactful to me as a prospective user, prospective student in our case. So now if you think about it from a behavior perspective, to summarize everything I've kind of covered, the old behavior is I would type a specific query into a search bar. I would click through blue links in multiple websites to find answers, right? And then I would regularly visit a website to search for details. The new behavior is I use natural conversational language like I would to anyone else, and I rely on AI to surface the most relevant information, and I trust it. And then I really only visit a website when I'm seeking in-depth info, or maybe I'm ready to take action. So this behavior change is rapidly changing the market. It's rapidly changing the volume of the searches that come in AI search versus traditional search. You can kind of see it here, right? The red line is what we would consider AI search, everything I covered a couple slides ago, there's Grok's, ChatGPT, etc. And then traditional search would be like your normal Google experience. By 2028, earlier than 2028, I should say the end of 2027, the traditional search market is going to be eclipsed by the AI search market. And I personally think it's going to happen sooner than this. I use ChatGPT and Gemini more than I use traditional Google. I think most folks, if you ask them, are starting to lean that way. In fact, 60% of all adults in the United States use AI for some of their research. And that number is even higher. It's 74% for those who are in their 20s and 30s. So to kind of sum up what we're looking at, the world we're looking at, is this is a quote from Neil Patel. He is a well-renowned SEO, AEO, search guru, for lack of a better word. And he has this quote, which I think really points to what is happening. And this is a little old, but it talked about 2025, and we're just accelerating from there. But more than half of the searches in 2025 don't lead anywhere. No one's clicking on them, right? People are getting answers from ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini without clicking on a single link. So if you, the brand, are not showing up in those responses, then you're invisible to half the internet. Now, last part is really important. You're invisible to half the internet. So think about those discovery moments when students are looking at where they want to take the next step in their education career. Which graduate degree are they looking for? Where do they want to get their MBA? Where do they want to pursue that further education? They may have never heard of your school, or maybe they have, but they're using those initial touch points in their ChatGPT experience to understand where they should even start, where they should even begin. So now what I want to do is have everyone do an experiment. And so with your help and on your computers or your phones, I want you to go to ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, Claude, whatever it is you're most comfortable with. If you use Google, use AI Mode or AI Overviews. And if you can, do this in an incognito window, or don't log in to ChatGPT, for example. Do it kind of agnostic of your personal history. The reason for that is if you use ChatGPT a lot and you're logged in, and then you ask some of these questions I'm going to have you ask, it will use your previous experience to influence it. So you kind of want to do this as if you are someone who is not you and a prospective student, which you'll see here in a second. So I'll give everyone a second here. Go to whatever tool you feel most comfortable with and just make sure you're in an incognito type of mode or logged out. Okay. So now what I want you to do is pretend you're a prospective student and a prospective student for your school, for your institution, for a program you promote or you're responsible for. And think about a question that that prospective student would ask. And it's your ideal student, right? So someone who you really, really want to reach and feel like they're the perfect match for what you offer. So think about what they might ask. It could be something simple. What's the best MBA degree in XYZ? Or it could be more nuanced, somewhere that has good scholarships or great career services, something along those lines. What were you really proud of and that you really tie to when you think about who you're trying to reach? So give you a second, think of a question. And then when you are ready, you can start typing it out. And then before you actually hit enter, you can if you want. Just give me 1 second. I'm just going to get a drink, but take a second and think of that question. Okay. So type it in. Now I want you to ask it. Hit enter. And after you do that, note the responses. See what's coming up. And as you're looking at those responses, first thing I want you to ask yourself or take note of is, did your institution even appear in the answer? And if you feel comfortable, you can put your answer in the chat. If not, that's totally fine. Some people, yes, some people, no. The gambit can be pretty large, depends on the question and sort of the institution itself, but it's pretty interesting to hear people and their responses. I've done this in person before, and I've heard audible gasps from people who suspected that they should be or thought they should be in the response, and they were nowhere to be seen. And don't worry if you aren't. I have a stat here. This is very common if you don't appear. So there's a reason for this. If you did appear, then I want you to look through the responses, and I want you to ask, what did the AI say about your institution? Meaning, was the information accurate? Was it positive? Was it negative? Those are important, or if not more important than just did you appear? Because if you appear and it's misleading or it's incorrect or it's providing the wrong story, that can be impactful, right? Before we move on from this, if you want to see how, let's say you didn't appear, right? And you wanted to appear, but let's think about your program or your institution and ask a question with that institution in mind. So let's say it's an MBA program in Iowa. Spoiler, I have a little thing I'm going to talk about in a second with that. But ask yourself, whatever my institution is, so XYZ institution, MBA program in Iowa, what are the pros and cons? So basically, you're asking a branded question. Is my program good? Is it bad? What are the thoughts? Ask that type of question and then also note those responses. And it's pretty interesting, right? You might see something that you are shocked by. You might be something that's very accurate. Maybe all of it's accurate. That's great. But as we move on from this experiment, I don't want anyone to walk away from this being like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? This is like, I can't control this. We can. This is where AEO comes in, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But you have to kind of start somewhere. You have to understand where you stand. And why this is so important is that 65% of Gen Z and Gen Alpha start their college searches in LLMs. And remember that Gen Z is turning 30 next year. So that age group is not just high school students. It's those in their 20s who are either continuing their education with graduate degrees, or they're starting a family, or they're middle of their first part of their career. So it is a very, very common and important part of an education journey for prospective students. The part I talked about a second ago is that you shouldn't be shocked or panicked, is that 20%, only 20% of higher education content has what we consider high AI visibility. Meaning most content is kind of buried and it doesn't show up. And the reason for that is because AEO and AI search and all these things are new. They're in their infancy. We're learning every single day what works and what doesn't. and the whole industry is kind of all taking notes together. What works, what appears, why doesn't it appear? It's all very, very informative for those who are in it day to day. And don't be shocked that this number comes in at such a low percentage. And I think if you looked at other industries, it would be very, very similar. So how did then search engines see a brand? How does AI search, for a better way to say that, see a brand? So I'll go through this pretty quickly because we're going to talk about how to like approach this from a higher level in a minute. But just to like level set here, the content is king when it comes to AI search, when it comes to large language models. And then where that content is very, very important to note. So owned content on your website is part of where it can pull information from, ChatGPT, Gemini, etc., where they're looking for information to answer questions, to speak to your brand. Earned, say like news sites. Any of those mentions are just as important, right? And then social is a very big part of this. Think about something like Reddit, talking about your institution or just like MBA degrees in general. Is an MBA even worth it anymore? Is that a question in Reddit that's being asked? Probably. It's probably in a subreddit, and there's going to be conversations about that that might influence the answers from a large language model. So it's really important to know that just because your content on your site might be strong, it might not be written in the way that AI search and AI search engines are looking for. So in particular, if your content on your site is hard to interpret, or it's buried in marketing language, it's unclear, it's not answering questions, and it might just be excluded from the results. So optimizing your content is really important to help answer those questions. And then also thinking about, like I just said, where is the content coming from an earned perspective? What is it? How is your content being shaped, or content related to you or your program or what you're trying to advertise, shaping the narrative from social channels, for example? We'll talk about all that in a little bit more detail later, but I wanted to set the stage for you a little bit about why maybe 20% is not what you'd expect to see. So all to say, there is an enormous opportunity in AI search, right? If 20% of the content is ready for AI, as high AI visibility, then there's an 80% runway to work with here. So AEO, I've mentioned it a couple times here or there, but you may have heard of it before. It's answer engine optimization. It's the next step in evolution of SEO. And there's also other terms for it that you might have heard if you are closer to this and closer to the search world. GEO is another term for this. LLMO, all the same idea. We kind of lump it together under AEO. And the actual industry itself hasn't really picked a name. We've planted our flag on AEO because we think it does exactly that. It is answering the types of questions our students would be looking to get answered. So what is it though? AEO is the practice of structuring and optimizing content so a brand, product, or service is accurately represented, big point, right? Accurately represented, and easily surfaced, the other big point, and AI-generated responses across platforms. Not just ChatGPT, not just Gemini, but across platforms. In a simple terms, it ensures that your brand is present within these critical discovery moments. A couple of key metrics here. I'll talk about these a little bit more. But what we look at when we think about AEO, we think about brand mentions or visibility. How often is your brand appearing? What is your share of voice? How often are you showing up versus competitors? Where are those citations? Where's that content coming from? Is it owned? Is it earned? Is it social? Unique human visits, not quite as important right now, but will become more important as more and more traffic moves to your site from large language models. And then sentiment. All 5 of these are really important. From an audit perspective, we focus on the first 3 and the one on the bottom. So I'll talk about what that audit means here momentarily. So thinking about an audit is really thinking about your baseline. Where do you stand? You just did an experiment, one isolated experiment, asking a question you would expect to be showing up for, your brand would be expected to show up for. That's great, right? You have a good understanding, but think about a way, or how do you understand from a bigger picture perspective how your brand really stacks up and what is most important to you. Let's do another example, but this one we're going to do it as a group. We're going to approach this as a team. And we're going to all imagine that we're responsible for marketing an MBA in Iowa. The reason I'm doing Iowa, I'm from there, so that's kind of why. I don't live there now, but I miss it very often. So let's imagine you're responsible for marketing an MBA in Iowa. Your goal, as you can imagine, build awareness and drive enrollment. What I want to think about, and we'll do this as a group, you don't actually need to do this, but we would define the prompts and the conversations you want, or we want our institution to appear in. We would do that based on target audience, who we're trying to reach, how students might explore an MBA in Iowa, and then any strengths in the program that we offer. Other areas as well you can think of, but really just thinking about what is most important. Very similar to that experiment that I was actually do. Think about the question, do you want to be a part of the answer? So a couple examples, maybe which MBA programs in Iowa offer strong ROI? Which MBA programs in Iowa offer scholarships? Lastly, which MBA programs in Iowa have great academic support services? These are 3 examples. Let's say we come up with 7 more, right? We have a bucket of 10 of them, and we just take those 10, and we run them across all the large language models, all the experiences that we can do, ChatGPT, Grok, etc. And we do it for 30 days, and we run it every single day. And we calculate and aggregate all that data, all the responses, and that's our pool of data that we're going to analyze in this audit. And that covers, doing that for so long covers a couple things. One, it makes sure that we have enough data to be statistically significant. And then 2, it makes sure that we think about having 10 or more of these questions, covers as many of the potential questions someone could ask. So then we move to the actual analysis phase. Like, what are we thinking about from an audit? What's important? The first, and I mentioned this a few slides ago, is visibility. So how often are we even showing up? 15% is a number I just chose, right? So that's saying that 15% of the time, our Iowa-based MBA program is appearing as an answer to those questions we selected, those prompts we selected. Now, that's not great. 15% is a lower number. From what we're seeing so far, it's about most of our partners are seeing anywhere from 20 to 35 to 40%, depending on the topic. Some are lower, some are a little bit higher, but that's about where we see it. But 15% of the time, that means 85% of the time, we aren't showing up. That's a very, very important piece to know. How do I even get us to show up? That's our first step. Second part of the audit is understanding how our institution or our program is being reflected. Is it accurate? Is it positive and negative? Where's it coming from? So let's just say that 7% of the time, the content is being cited from our website. So that's not a lot, but 7% we know it is, and we can see where it comes from, which topics, which questions, things like that. But then 20% of the responses actually come from news articles. Maybe another 15% comes from social. This is really important to understand as you think about how to understand where your story is being shaped, how it's being shaped, and how you can adjust or move the needle in a certain direction to properly reflect your brand in these responses. Might say that 30% of the responses contain outdated information. Application deadlines were wrong. Or it's pulling from a site on your, or page on your site that hasn't been updated in years. Remember, when prospective students are discovering this information, they're seeing those dates, they're seeing those requirements, those list of programs that they need to take to get their MBA. And that's what they're using as their first measure stick of whether or not this is an institution or program they want to continue exploring. And then you have 15% of responses have a negative sentiment, say, and it's highlighting high tuition and costs, while 85% have a positive statement highlighting strong career outcomes. All this is information for us to understand how do we approach that next phase? How do we solve this? How do we improve it? How do we make sure that we're providing the narrative needed to get our large language models out there to reflect our brand accurately? So, have all that. We have how often we appear. We understand sentiment, citations, accuracy. Now we think about our competitors. 15% is the number we chose, right? That's our visibility. Let's say we pick 3 or 4 competitors, a couple down the street, a couple institutions in Iowa that are bigger, and we compare how often we appear and what's our share of voice versus them. So in this case, I make this up that there's one competitor that's got double our share of voice. We're beating a couple of the smaller ones. So what are those institutions doing? What is that 30% competitor A doing that we're not doing? Why are they beating us to the punch here? Important to understand where your competitors lay and how they compete with you and how they appear with you and how they're reflected in the same type of responses that you want to be a part of. Last piece, technical readiness. I'll kind of go through this pretty quickly, but generally speaking, if your site is SEO ready, it's SEO technical, and it has a good foundation, you're in a pretty good spot for AEO and for AI search. There's a couple things to do here and there, but I'll talk about in a few slides. But in general, most sites are ready for this. And as we learn more about what works and what doesn't, this might evolve, and there might be additional steps that need to be taken. But I'm giving us a 70%. Good job, us, right? So, what does AEO audit help us understand? Summarizing AI visibility, sentiment, citation and content accuracy, competitive share of voice and analysis, and then a technical audit. So you get those pieces. That's your audit. That's where you stand. And then you move into action. What do you do about it? How do you move the needle in a certain way? How do you improve your visibility? How do you go from 15% to 30%? How do you go to 30% to 45%? This is where action comes into play. So I'm going to walk through 5 areas you can focus on at a high level, and take these back, as if you're closer to your website or closer to your content generation, use these to help guide maybe some next steps with your content creation. If you're not close to it, you can take screenshots, whatever you want to do, and share it back to your teams. These are just guideposts. And at the end, we have a guide you can download with a QR code, which talks a lot more about this in more detail. So we'll start with number 1, is that, as you can imagine, your content is very, very important. And your content itself on your site should answer questions and it should drive conversations. Remember, it's not usually just a one and done conversation in ChatGPT. It might be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 questions. So how do you structure your content in a way that both answers those questions and then drives that conversation? Make sure your content is clear and has that deeper explanation if needed. 2 areas within your content to think on. Optimize what you already have. You have plenty of content on your site, right? Is it up to date? Could your program pages use an FAQ? Could it be structured in a way that helps answer those questions a little bit better? Is it just a big block of text? Think about structure in that way, because then the large language models, when they're looking at your page to answer the questions, to pull the information up from, they're looking for a similar way to answer the question that the human would be looking for. Secondly, build a proactive and expert-led content strategy. You all have experts on your campus, faculty who can help with this. But whether it's thought leadership, whether it's blog posts, anything that you can utilize to put your information and your brand out there to drive conversation in a really proactive and meaningful way, do that. Come up with content that's related to your degree, why an MBA is still worth it, how ROI is shaped from an MBA, things like that. You can write articles about that, and that'll pull in to ChatGPT responses when someone's asking a relevant question. And make sure you have a strategy that's ongoing. Develop a content strategy over 4 months, 6 months, 8 months. Don't just one and done it, because you need to make sure that you're continuously providing content for these large language models to pull in. Second, really, really important to keep content current, accurate, and relevant. Generally speaking, we're seeing that most large language models, the ChatGPTs, will pull in information from the last 6 months. Now, this might change. A year from now, I might say it's 12 months. I might say it's 3 months. We're evolving, right? But right now, it's about 6 months. So if you have information that is outdated or it's not labeled and up to date, and it seems like it's a couple years old, it's probably going to be skipped. So it's really important to make sure that you have content that is up to date. So publish ongoing content, kind of what I just talked about in the last slide. Keep doing it. Have a content calendar. And then if you have out of date information, just update it. Provide a last updated by, make sure it's up to date, accurate, all the things you would expect from a website. Just really, really important to have that in there and in your ecosystem so that if it does get pulled in from ChatGPT, it's pulling in the right information as well. Remember, accuracy is important in this part too. Use media to reinforce your authority. So visuals and videos, from video, to an image, very important. And if you use AI mode or you use AI overviews a lot in your experiences in search, you'll often see that videos are cited in the responses, or imagery is cited, and or both. So it's important that when you develop content and you think about content on your site, you're utilizing these to rich media as much as possible. It'll provide a little bit of extra signal, a little authority for the large language model to pull in your answers and your content into the answers. And you can put videos on YouTube, for example, and then put it on your page. YouTube is huge. YouTube is in itself is a search engine. It's like the second highest search engine in the world because people go there for how do I build a fence, right? There's like plenty of how-to docs and things to look for and information out there in video format that people are looking to get. So Google itself will pull that into a lot of responses very, very often. From an image perspective, same idea. You want to have that image optimized. You want it to be compressed. You want it to be very, very effective in terms of size and download rate and speed and upload. All of that is going to be really important so that it can easily be pulled in because speed is a factor here. Simultaneously, any alt text you include will be important. So imagery is very, very good here. And then leverage that video, like I said, but think about it not just having a video on YouTube, but also could you put that video on your page and could you put the transcript on your page? Could you write an article that looks exactly like the video, written like a video? So maybe it's MBA ROI in Iowa. That's what you want to focus on. Why MBA in Iowa is great for ROI. I'm just making this up. Maybe I do a video about that. I have an expert describe it in a video. We have the transcript. That transcript's converted to an article. There's an article on your site. You post it. You link the video. And then on YouTube, your video is there. So now you have all these credible sources that all say the same exact thing to answer the question that you want to be a part of. So utilizing this media is very, very important, and it'll help, again, reinforce authority. Build trust beyond your website. The fourth one here. This one is one of the more challenging ones, to be honest. You can only control so much, but think about any sort of aggregate sites that are rating degrees that you're most care about, or degrees that you're focused on, or just institution whole that you're focused on. How are you being rated? How are you being talked about? Is that correct? There are plenty of instances where it hasn't been correct, and you can go in and ask them to update it or send an email to get them to update it. The other area here is going to be social. Do everything you can to own your social content, your organic social content. So if you have a specific Instagram page for your graduate school of business or for your business program, or if it's at an institution level, it needs to be monitored. It needs to be utilized, because if you can use it in a way that mirrors the content from across your site and puts it into an organic social post on Instagram, that's an additional source for the large language model to pull in. So think about organic social, utilize it where you can. Instagram is an example I use, but Facebook or Meta, or in general, LinkedIn is a great one. Reddit, if you can own your own Reddit, your subreddit, that's great. You can't control Reddit conversations, but you can be aware of them. So all of this is really important to understand what's going on beyond your website, not just your website itself. Lastly, strengthen the technical foundation. Strong content only appears, right, when AI can easily access it and understand it. So your site structure at a high level needs to be very clear and structured. Generally speaking, if you're ready from an SEO perspective or organic search perspective, you're good. Speed, prioritize that speed and performance. And I mentioned it a couple slides ago with imagery. The imagery needs to be optimized in a way that it loads very, very quickly. And also your page just needs to be optimized in a way that it loads very quickly. So in action, these are the areas to focus on in AI search. Website content should answer questions, drive conversations. Keep content current, accurate, and relevant. Use media to reinforce authority. Build trust beyond your website, and then strengthen that technical foundation. So these are 5 areas for you all to focus on as you walk away from this. So a few parting thoughts. One, and I talked about a lot, screenshot this if you need to screenshot anything to take it to anybody. The AI is rapidly changing the search landscape. To succeed, institutions need to show up in decision-driving moments. They need to actively shape the narrative, and they need to be represented accurately and completely. The world of search is totally changing. It has changed. Information discovery is different. Can't react here. You got to be proactive. Early adopters will always have an advantage over late adopters, and they learn a lot as the evolution of search happens in real time. One last piece here, ads in ChatGPT. For those who may have seen this about a month ago, a little over a month and a half now, ChatGPT started testing ads. So that is signaling 2 things to us. One is to be successful in AI search, it will require an integrated approach, meaning AEO, that organic sort of everything we just talked about approach, plus paid. How do I put money and dollars into ChatGPT to be able to show ads where it matters most? Now, this isn't available to all advertisers yet. It was kind of in an alpha beta mode right now. when it is available. Early adopters here will also have an advantage over those who come late. Paid search then, and my second bullet is that it's naturally for those who are closer to the marketing side. Paid search is evolving already, and it's moving away from like specific keywords that people are going to be trying to show their ads for, to really talking about hitting the right audience, the right conversations, and the right intent. Google's already starting moving in this direction. They kind of have to evolve pretty quickly now that ChatGPT has introduced ads. So if you're interested in learning more about an AEO audit, I have a QR code here, and it talks about everything that I just talked about, excuse me, is covered in that, and we go into more detail about what is actually offered with it. But if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Jamie, do you have anyone from the Q&A?
No, not seeing anyone in the Q&A. I do have one question though that I have gotten more recently, is that we're thinking about SEO to AEO. Can you just talk a little bit about like video and podcasts and streaming and those types of things and how we should be thinking about that in the world of AEO?
Yeah, I mean, in general, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but every single video that you create, whether you do a podcast, whether you create a video that's done by students talking about how valuable their time in an institution is, utilizing that and incorporating that into your content in two ways. One, making sure you put it on YouTube. All of it should live on YouTube. And then simultaneously incorporating it into your site, and then utilizing any of those transcripts and converting them to blogs, converting them to conversational FAQs, whatever it is, and mirroring that content on your site in a LinkedIn post, in a Reddit post. All of that will be very, very, very helpful. So it's important to do that still, meaning like still engage in those experiences and exercises of creating that content, but just not just setting it somewhere and forgetting about it, but really utilizing it in a way that can be incorporated and pulled in to large language models by just duplicating and mirroring in as many places as you can.
Yeah, that's great. We did get another question. So this is around website design.
Mhm.
Do you recommend sidebar links or links embedded in the content paragraphs when it comes to AEO?
Good question. We are seeing, in general, I think in the content is probably the way to go. How things are being cited by large language models is really, really interesting. And we're sort of discovering if having all the information, whether it is in a dropdown or whether it's in the content itself or linked somewhere else, is more effective. I don't know if we know that answer yet, but generally speaking, I would put it in the content itself, any of those links.
That's great. We got another question.
Sure.
So do you know if LLMs can easily search web copy that is in accordion folders on web pages? And then they
Yes.
kind of go on to ask, do you have any advice about how to organize web pages that are copy heavy to get the most out of AEO?
Yes. So yes to the first part. Second part is FAQs work pretty well, or utilizing headers that speak to the general gist of what you're trying to answer in a paragraph. So instead of just having a number of paragraphs that are a blog post related to a specific topic that you might read in like an essay or like a traditional article, utilizing headers within each section that speak to that specific area, almost like what is this paragraph, what is this focus of 3, 4 sentences trying to answer if someone was going to ask a question, and utilize that header to sort of preamble or set the stage for what that question is. That will help then make the information easier for a large language model to pull from, because it's looking for a conversational response to a conversational question. So that's kind of how you can think about it. And that's why Reddit, for example, is so commonly pulled in, is because someone at the top of the page asks a question, and then everyone's answering in various ways, whether it's directly or writing the novel themselves about why X, Y, Z, but it's all structured in a way that's easy for a large language model to pull in. If you can mirror your content in a similar way, it's good. You don't just want to make like every single page being FAQ, because it's not a good user experience. You kind of have to find the balance between someone on your site looking for information and discovering it with how does that get translated into a large language model response.
That's great. One other question for you. So historically, hired websites were a place that prospective students would go to find information. Like they
Yeah.
would actively go there to search information. Starting to get the sense that websites are more there to validate and to convert. Is that kind of your reaction? Like, how should we be thinking about websites in the future? If you could predict?
Well, I will give you my uh prediction beyond prediction, which is not within, I don't think, the next couple of years, but I do feel like in the future, uh I as a user, this is a couple years down the line, so I don't have an answer for how this would work. But I as a user would be interested in learning about that MBA program in Iowa, and I'm on ChatGPT and I say my prompt is based on what you know about me, I want you to
Mm,
fill out an RFI form for the top 10 MBAs in Iowa. And agentically, meaning the actual large language model ChatGPT would do it itself and connect to your website agent to agent. I think that's a few years away, but that could be a future, right? And the more immediate, um, I think it's important. Sorry, I lost track of what was the actual question because now I just got lost in my own little world. Ask the question again, Jamie.
no, you you did a great job. I was kind of asking your opinion of like how we should be thinking about
Oh,
websites in
okay.
the future.
Sure. So
Mhm.
that is a future. I think in the
Yeah.
immediate, very important to make sure your site is optimized for conversion. So conversion rate optimization is important because if you think about any user who gets to your site now from either a large language model conversation or directly from like clicking the link within the citation, or they've done some discovery, they're already further down the funnel than your average prospect. The website right now is not dead by any means. It's really important to keep it up to date because people will still visit to validate, like you said, but maybe just thinking about structuring it in a way that moves people further, quicker to a conversion as opposed to providing so much upfront information. And a lot of that is testing. So to be able to validate that theory and the idea is utilizing your GA4 and your analytics backend data and understanding and tracking and setup so that if the user comes from a large language model, which they can click on a citation, right, and a ChatGPT response, and they go to your site, you can set up your GA4 in a way that will basically put those people in a bucket that this person came from a large language model and watch how they navigate your site and utilize that to inform maybe the future and how you adjust it. Maybe you cut a couple pages out, you move forms around, you change information to be more answering questions that are not readily available or a little bit more down funnel than you would have done previously. So that is not to say you need to go overhaul your website tomorrow, but it was really important to at least take that first step and watch what traffic is doing and how it's engaging with your website when it comes from a large language model.
That's great. We have another question.
Sure.
So, Amber asked, I see some universities with a page that compares their program versus their competitor
Mm.
programs as a way to provide the side-by-side benefits, requirements, costs, etc. I would think this would be a good source for LLMs, but would be interested in your take.
So that is a comparison topic, meaning the idea of like asking a bunch of comparison questions. That is a way you could try it, and you would want to monitor how it pulls in the information, and if it does, meaning does ChatGPT even pull that in? The other thing is your institution comfortable doing that, comparing directly on your site, your versus a competitor? That is going to be up to you all, but I don't have enough evidence to say that works or that doesn't. But it is an area that I'm very interested in having some of our partners at least explore, because in theory it should work. And the idea that it answers directly the type of question, but then is it going to be like a war of attrition and that client, partner A does that and then their competitor does it, I don't know. So it will be something to try and see how it reflects and impacts. But very, very interesting thought. You're not the first to think that, but it's a good approach to try, I would say.
I do wonder, and I haven't thought about this before, but this question kind of prompted the thought of like having content that compares programs. So if you have a set of programs that you find serve similar audiences and it's really they're self-selected by the audience based on a lot of different factors, like could you build content that compares your different programs, the types of job functions, the ROI, the right fit kind of thing, and could that be helpful content from a world of LLMs?
Absolutely, because that answers a lot of questions that prospective students will be looking for. So I think that's a great approach as well.
Awesome. I think that's all of our questions. Last call.
Okay.
Yeah.
If there's any more, this is the guide that if anyone's interested in downloading, feel free to use the QR code there. And it talks a lot about what I covered just in some more detail. 5 quick wins you can implement this month is very similar, and then you can do kind of a diagnostic of your AEO readiness in a short, little abbreviated way. But very helpful. If you have any questions about that, feel free. I don't think I have my email in here, but if we'll send it out. I will talk about this for days. So happy to answer any questions for anyone that has them.
And then, John, I would like to thank you and Jamie. This was really eye-opening, and I learned a lot of new things and looked at my subreddits while you were
Oh,
presenting. And
good.
now
Good. Yeah.
right. So that was something new for me. And also, I would just like to say Iowa is the best because I am also from Iowa.
Let's
So
go. That's right. Yeah.
yes, let's go. And I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. This was great, and look for the recorded webinar up on our exchange. And of course, I hope to see everybody that's on here at the summit in a couple of weeks in Baltimore. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks all. Take care.
Okay.